Good afternoon, everyone. This is our recorded info session about the MLTI virtual conference. So hopefully if you're joining us today, you will get all the information that you need, at least for the time being, about the virtual conference that we are calling the MLTI Winter Classic. My name is John Graham. I'm the digital learning specialist in the DOE's Learning Through Technology department, or yes. And I'm joined by Jonathan R. Werner. While I introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Jonathan. I am the MLTI Ambassador Program Facilitator, which basically means I help the ambassadors end up where they need to end up to support you in your schools. And the virtual and in-person student conferences are two of my absolute favorite events of the year. And I'm delighted to join John today to talk a little bit about what we know so far and what questions we know we can answer, with the understanding that we do have a few months ahead of us that we may need to do some modifications, but this will certainly give you the general outline of the plan.
Absolutely. So just for those who might be unaware, we shifted to a virtual conference model in 2020 for obvious reasons, and then we kept that for a couple years, and we have found that we've had such good turnout from a wide variety of school districts. So typically the student conference that we host in May is at the University of Maine campus in Orono, which is, easy for some schools to get to, not so easy for other schools to get to. So one of the things that we really liked about the virtual conference is that it's an event that we are able to have schools from, very far southern York County and far east into Washington County and far north into northern Maine, and some schools in western Maine as well. So a wide variety of schools. So that's been a big positive. Plus just the numbers that we're able to get. We're able to include basically as many students as a school wants to have involved, and we're not limited to the capacity of the Collins Center in Orono. So it is one of those things that we're planning on keeping, and I think based on feedback from schools, we're just trying to make some modifications and changes to make it an even better experience for people. One of the things that we've decided to do is to shift it away from May, so it's a little bit divorced from the student conference, and we decided to move it all the way back into early March. And our thinking was that period from February vacation to April vacation can be a challenging slog for a teacher, and it's difficult to plan field trips, plan, a wide variety of different things that you might want to do to break up that time. So we had thought developing the virtual conference to fit within that model, and then we decided to go with a winter theme, really leaning into it. Hopefully in March, we're not all so sick of winter that last thing we want to talk about is winter. But that kind of brought about the Winter Classic motif that we're going with for this year. Other big changes, I think, to make sure that people are aware of is that we're really looking for this to be an asynchronous event. So in the past, people have joined the conference on a specific day. We do still want people to, join us on that specific day if you have the capacity. We've checked through calendars, and it doesn't seem to be in conflict with, most main schools. Obviously, weather events can happen. But we're hoping that this, the change from that synchronous format where you have to get on Zoom meetings at specific times, we know that provided some challenges for schools. So our thinking was to provide something that was a little bit more asynchronous, so schools could modify what we're offering to fit their schedule. So just like in the past, if your whole school wants to join, you could do that. If you just have a grade level, somebody takes the lead and they want to do that, that's fine. If you have a team within the grade level, that works. And you could just be a single teacher at your school that's I'm gonna have my kids join, or maybe you're a specials teacher and you're going to have your students join, that day. Whichever model you're interested in absolutely works for us, but just know that it doesn't just have to be, you know, a small group. It's certainly something that you can expand. And we're hoping that this video will help you explain to your colleagues, administration, tech department, whomever you need to convince and cajole into participation, that you can do so. We also, I think, have the goal of expanding beyond the regular 5th through 10th grade span, which has been part of MLTI. So those are the grades that we are providing devices for. You do not need to have an MLTI device to participate in this event. We're really looking to connect with school districts who have opted into MLTI. And I think we have a lot of interest in expanding beyond the 5 through 10 grade span. I know there's been a lot of interest just based on chit chat that I've heard from people, emails I've got, that people are interested in how could this work at the elementary level. So we're definitely, in terms of designing the Winter Classic, we're thinking about making this something that could accommodate the elementary grade level as well. I do want to definitely emphasize that preparation is really important. That's one of the reasons why we're recording this in December, so people get this information now so that they can be prepared for early March. While we don't anticipate this is going to be particularly like challenging high-tech stuff that's outside of anybody's skill set, we do recognize that there will likely be some new technology, new tools that maybe you haven't seen before, and that can be, you know, outside of some people's comfort level. So just trying to make sure that if you're the lead teacher, you know, working with administration to make sure that people have time to prepare, whether it's, you know, part of a staff meeting or, you know, connecting with teams in your building to make sure that they, you know what they need to know ahead of time. And kind of the last thing that I'd wanted to mention just in terms of this opening, because in conversations of explaining this to people, kind of what we're thinking, and I've been at schools where we've had like a field day in the winter where you're doing different activities and rotating through stations. I think there are elements to this. I know at the elementary level, some schools have participated in Winter Kids, their winter games that they do in the winter. I think there are elements of that we're looking to incorporate. Hour of Code, obviously CS Ed Week happened earlier this month. I think there are elements of that, certainly like the unplugged pieces and the computer science, you know, small bite-sized activities are, you know, components that we're looking at. And people on our team are very familiar with things like Goose Chase and Breakout EDU, Kahoot, Quizlet, all of those kinds of gamified interfaces. So I think we'll be leveraging, if not those specifically, I think elements of those. So if you are familiar with any of those, then hopefully some of the elements of our game-based approach will appeal to you and make sense to you as you move forward. And now I will pass it to Jonathan to talk a little bit about the game approach and kind of what we have set up so you can see some of it yourself.
John, I'll ask you to pause for just a second. I'll get myself set up to screen share, and then we'll return. So, as John said, we have MLTI 2024 Main Winter Classic as our focus for this year's theme. And hopefully some of the questions you've had so far about the process and the behind the scenes why aspect of this, John's been able to answer, but we thought it'd be useful to also walk through a little bit of how we imagine the day being set up. One of the things we were trying to be responsive to was some of the tech difficulties or things that when we were trying to be synchronous, it was really difficult to overcome in the moment on the fly. And this will hopefully allow people to pivot a little bit, move to something else, to something that's functioning better. If they're having difficulty with something, we will have a helpline available, but this wouldn't hopefully, you know, grind you to a halt during that process because you have a bunch of different options. So the general concept is that you're playing a board game, and instead of attending sessions that are set up on a particular schedule, you are touring the state of Maine. And as you do that, encountering 6 different kinds of activities. So you would roll a 6-sided die. It'll come up red, orange, blue, green, brown, or purple. And let's say for the moment you have rolled a red, you end up on cities and towns. And from wherever you've begun, you'll move to the closest neighboring city and town. So let's start on the Washington County side. If you were to begin in West Quoddy Head, you rolled a red, you would go to Machias. Or if you were in Sebastopol, you'd roll and go to either Bangor or Dover Foxcroft. So we're imagining here for a moment that you have rolled Bridgeton, you head to Bridgeton, and there's information about the town there, and then a QR code. So for this game, you will need a device that reads QR codes. We will have a secondary option that I'll talk about in a moment, but the easiest way to interact with it will be to scan the QR code that appears on the card, which will take you to a website. And in a little bit, John's going to show you an example of what that might look like. Once you've completed the task that's there, you roll again. You might get a river, you might get a mountain. John will share the Parks and Woods example in a moment. But if you get off the beaten path, that is an unplugged coding activity. So you'll find two things: a brief summary of the activity on that card and a QR code. What we're hoping is that there'll be enough of these to choose from that you'll find one that matches well to the ability of your group and your age group. John mentioned that we're going to have accessibility points for lots of different levels of work, and that'll be the case for each of the places you visit in the four areas that I just mentioned. But in the concept of unplugged coding, you may have a lower, a middle, and an upper level activity that's available, or you may get to that page and be like, you know what, this is going to be a tough one for my group, or this is too easy for my group. And we'd encourage you then just to pull another card and try a different one. But the intent of having that short description there is so you can decide whether or not it's something that your team feels comfortable with. If you have a question about it, go ahead and scan the QR code and then take a look at the page itself, which will give you some more information. So your basic gameplay is roll the die, and whichever of these 5 categories you've landed on, go to the nearest relevant one of those categories, or flip the card for the off the beaten path, an adventure where you leave the map for a little bit. And then the final option is that you may roll Snowy Snapshot. This asks the participants to take a look at a chart that will be created. They're going to roll 4 different dice: the red, the yellow, the green, and the blue die. And the numbers that come up will correspond to these 4 categories. A list of actions. So if they rolled a 3, that might be downhill skiing. A list of emotions. They rolled a 5, that might be joyful. They roll on the green die a 7, list of problems. They have appendicitis at the moment. And blue die, number 2, list of reactions. That is shock and terror. So you're now going to enact this scene. The whole room stops play. Everyone who is currently in the midst of whatever activity they're in the middle of is now pausing to participate in the individual from the team or the group in that team doing the action with the emotion with the problem. And the reaction is of the crowd watching this happen. And we'd love for you to photograph that moment and share it with us. And over the course of the day, we'll be collecting artifacts from the various activities people have been doing, but also aspects of this sort of funny piece, the Snowy Snapshots, that give a chance to kind of show one another what school looks like, say hello, kind of interact a little bit with each other, which we found is a really fun aspect of the in-person conference that is a little more difficult to replicate with the remote conference. So hoping that offers you an opportunity. And one of the other things we wanted to emphasize is that there's not dead time here. So you're not waiting for team 1 to complete their task. The goal is to have it consistently moving at whatever pace people are ready. So team 1 rolls, let's say that's 3 or 4 kids. They pull Bangor, they look at the Bangor card. That city is giving them information from the QR code. They start that activity. Immediately, team 2 rolls. They've rolled the city and town as well. They go do that one. Team 3 rolls theirs, they continue. And the only thing that will stop play is if someone rolls rolls purple, gets the snowy snapshot, and now all play in the room stops. It might then be as you proceed, it goes team one, team two, team three, team four, team two, team three, team one, because it'll take different amounts of time for a team to complete that task. But whenever they have completed the task, the next thing they do is move on the board to the new location, and proceed with play. So we're not intending to build in lots of dead time. We're building in something that also allows for asynchronous content being pursued by different teams at different paces in whatever way feels comfortable to them. Hopefully that is responsive to some of the concerns about differentiation in a large group of kids who some are really slowed down, some are moving faster. Also allows the teacher to circulate and check in with how a team is doing, but those other teams are able to continue their work at the same time. So, John, I just rolled green. What do I do now?
So we are going to flip one of the green cards. So this is one that I had set up. So to bully public land. So this card, if you had pulled this card, you would scan it and it would, well, it does have a little description on there about bully. We are hoping that students are going to pick up a lot of knowledge of Maine. I'm sure many of these places will be familiar to some people, but there will be others on here that they're absolutely not familiar with. Maybe we'll get some people developing some bucket lists for places they want to go in the future. Yes, using
I'd
their
like to introduce
gazetteer.
you to my new best friend. Everything I never knew I didn't know about Maine, I've been learning over the last few months as we design this.
Yes. So the bully, which actually is on my bucket list of places to go in Maine, if they scan that QR code, it will take them into, we're going to have these set up as individual pages that they can go to. So it's not like they're going to need to go to something and then navigate through. We're hoping the QR codes is going to take care of all of those challenges. So you can see on here, it has an estimated time. Obviously, that is an estimate. So it could change based on team's ability, grade level, experience, etc. And then also difficulty, again, something that we're trying to determine on our end. I have run versions of this particular activity in the past with third grade and up in middle school. So when I was developing this, part of my thinking was like, this is like moderate level, but there might be pieces of this that, certain students or higher level students might be able to move through very quickly. Other students, it might be a little bit more challenging. I think that's where the preparation pieces for teachers and, really knowing your kids and what they can do, what supports that they might need. That's why we're going to try to make sure we have as much of the materials here available, well in advance, so people have that time to go through and preview. So moving along. So this activity, 3D snowflakes. So it's going to have a little description of basically what they're doing. So for this one, they're going to be taking a 2D, or they're creating a 2D digital snowflake, which can be then turned into 3D snowflakes. So I've got a couple, you can see in number one, I've got a couple different website options for them. Again, it's one of those things, if you as a teacher were looking through, you might see this activity. Maybe you've done this before, something similar. You might direct them to another website that it's absolutely fine. You can see one of them, it says a free account required. We'll try to make notes of all of those types of things that can provide some little hiccups. If you're a tech director or tech department person listening, yes, we will make sure that we share all of those components ahead of time so that they're able to connect and make sure that apps are not, apps they can download, websites they can access, all of that stuff. So something like setting up a free account is something that people would want to know. Then it just kind of goes through the steps of the different pieces that they would need. This, we have a still image here, but the image that you'd see here is actually a GIF. So it kind of walks through some of the steps of what they would do to make that. once they've gone through and made that, then it has a couple of different options. So we just kind of spoke to the leveling components of that. So if they've made an SVG or an STL file, there are different things that they can do. So if you have access to your printer, you could put that into Tinkercad, and then you could actually have students render that, so you could 3D print the snowflakes that they design. That would be something that you could do, again, kind of up to the discretion of the teacher in your school and what you have access to, what you have capacity to do. You also could do laser cutting. You know, we know some schools have glow forges and other equipment. So same type of thing. So it's you're taking equipment and using your laser cutter to do that. Again, up to your discretion. And then if you have access to CoSpaces, any like 3D element that you make, you could pull into a CoSpaces space. So you could actually set up a space that had all of these student snowflakes in them if you wanted to. Again, one of those things we're trying to think of ways that people might go above and beyond, or how they might leverage the technology that they have within their school context. So we will try to set up, you know, a wide variety of those. So ways that if you're working down to an earlier grade level, you might want to make something a little bit easier. We'll take that into consideration, and then kind of those, like I showed you in that one, the ways to level up and kind of do something additional, again, based on your capacity and students' comfort level with doing so.
So a couple other things to bear in mind or to be aware of. The 4 types of places down the left-hand side of the board are 4 types of activities. So John just shared with us one of the parks and woods cards. Those are all themed around the idea of gaming, 3D design, and AR, VR work. If you land on a city, that'll have to do with graphics, media, design, visual and performing arts. If you land on the water, rivers and lakes, you'll be looking at coding, programming, and computational thinking. And then if you land in the mountains, looking at questions of digital citizenship or activities related to digital citizenship. So as they tour, you'll notice that every type of place is connected to the other 3 types. With luck of the draw, you might end up with a couple of repeats. But if I'm in Holton and I roll brown, I'm going to Big Rock. Green, I'm going to Katahdin or Pajo Mary. Looks like I'd also go down to Jefferson. Holton's a very well-connected city, it turns out. But no individual place is connected to its same color. So you won't ever repeat, except if you roll the exact same color, you stay where you are and do that. Typically, you're going to move to a new space or do an off the beaten path unplugged activity or one of the snowy snapshots. The goal there being to get a diversity of experiences. And by grouping these, it's helping us make sure that you end up with your students in a number of different places. Another thing you may find useful to do in advance, and that you can do at any point during the day, is scan the QR code that's on the board. So down in the right-hand corner where it says scan me to get started, we're hoping we will create a landing page that we're hoping is really helpful to answer as many questions as possible. But one of the things that'll be linked there is help, I'm lost in Maine. Whether it's on a mountain, a lake, or other location. And our goal then is to have a Zoom room set up with a bunch of our ambassadors and staff available to answer any questions you have. Those people will also be able to refer you to someone else or refer you to other locations that might be helpful. And we'll also have digital backups for everything that you're seeing printed or which we just shared. So for example, if your QR code is not working or your device, I mentioned earlier, you don't have a QR code reading device easily available, that'll give you the ability to get to any of these activities via a link. So there'll be a table for all the Parks and Woods cards, all the Rivers and Lakes cards, and you can just click in to get to that activity. So the goal there would be to give you the ability to problem solve on your own, not by any means requiring that you do that. We're happy to support it, but I know that sometimes in real time, it'll be a little easier to kind of do that problem solving first step. And this page will also include things like a gameplay sample video that you could watch with students beforehand, or something that might answer frequently asked questions that we're getting over the course of the day. one of the things that's really nice about the way the game is set up, and one of the reasons we did it this way, is that all these Canva pages, which is where the Djibouti one is an example, you're landing on an individual slideshow in Canva for the purpose of displaying that information. But if something's going wrong and we learn about it, we can modify the activity on the fly. So if there's a broken link, something like that, we would love to get your feedback in real time because we do have the ability to update. So while the board is static, QR codes are printed and static, the result for your end is that even if something isn't working immediately, we should be able to problem solve it pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I do think one of the things that's important to point out is that there is kind of this hybrid element to it, that some of this, would be virtual, students working on their devices. There, we do have the goal of sending physical components out to schools. So you should be getting boxes in addition to your t-shirts. We were hoping to be sending things out to school that they can use. So some of those things may maybe part of like the game itself. Some of them are like more for the unplugged activity, I guess, which are part of the game, but the unplugged activities piece of it. So trying to find that balance between stuff where you're using technology, using a screen, and stuff that's unplugged. So I think that's one of the things that for us is really important to like find that balance between the two, because I think just having somebody, and we'd heard that as far as people being on a Zoom session for a prolonged period of time, like what could we do to kind of like shift away from that? Because we don't want people to think like, oh, if you're doing an MLTI event, it just means that you're like looking at a screen all day. We want people to realize that there's, a wide variety of things that you can do with technology, things that are both plugged and unplugged.
I'm sure someone has named it before, but I think we need a specific term for a remote coughing fit. Thank you for staying there in the middle, John. I don't know what that would be called, but I urge everyone to think on that. What would we call it when you are having difficulty breathing in the middle of a Zoom? Okay, so one of the things we would also really love for people to do is, as John said, try some of this out in advance. We wondered, for example, you'll have access to the game before the game begins. Maybe play it in a staff meeting, play it with a small group of students and try it out with them, see how that goes. That to us feels like really well invested time and is going to make your actual gameplay day go better. We're hoping as well to have some elements of the day that you can access that are off the board. So for example, in the past, you may remember we've had an hour of activities available during lunch, which is video content that John has assembled. That's something you could access at 10:30, 11:30, 12:30. This asynchronous piece is also intended to embrace the reality that not all schools are on the same bell schedule. And so when we were trying to have a synchronous event, it wasn't always lining up with someone's availability. And so this capacity to kind of step away from the game, my friends up in Caribou, for example, have an 11 to 1 o'clock break every day, which includes lunch and their arts classes, gym, and those specials. So for them, it's going to work really well to play until 11, pause for 2 hours, and then return at 1 o'clock. But they might want to restart with some asynchronous shared content, some video viewing, those kinds of things that'll be available. Or maybe kids are eating lunch in your room and you want to take a look at that as well. Any of that is intentionally built in to give you more flexibility than you've had in the past. One other piece that we thought we might be able to lean into is the replicability of this going forward and the utilization of the resources in more than one place. So we'd encourage you to hold on to everything that we send because you could play the game at a later point. One of the things that'll be included in the packet is the 32 unplugged coding activities will be printed in a brochure, and you'll be able to just take that little book and page through and work your way through any of those activities that might be interesting. Our hope is that during the unplugged period, students are able to fully put their device down and do something that's engaged only in non-digital form. So those kinds of resources will be almost like artifacts that come out of the game. And maybe later on, you want to play this with other faculty members after the event, try it out with them. we'll be using some of the resources, some of those landing pages for professional development with people. So it gives us a physical locus to access these materials going forward. And we hope it's something you'll integrate into future opportunities, whether it's a repetition of that, or if you're not available. I'm not sure we've said the day, John, on Thursday, March 7th, to participate in our actual activity.
And I do think it's also important to make note that we really have the goal of building something. And as Jonathan was saying, like this game board that we're building, like with QR codes and stuff like that, we have the ability to change stuff on the back end. So I think there is the ability, if this goes really well, that it's something that we'd want to build upon for next year. Not that we do an exact repeat of the exact same thing, but I think, once people understand, like, okay, it's a day that this is how it goes, this is how it works. Maybe you're one teacher in your building that does it, but next year you could get a lot of other people involved. I think that's definitely one of the things that we're trying to do is try something that's innovative and different, and we'll definitely be getting feedback from people and figure out how to improve upon this model for 2025. And then I wanted to end today with some of the different questions that we've received from people. Jonathan, I say you come off mute. Did you have something else to add?
Oh, I was about to say, are there any questions? And strangely, the audience was very silent.
Yes, silent audience. So questions that we have received in the past. So a few that I wanted to mention. So one, people have asked if we didn't purchase MLTI devices, is this something that we need to, do we need to be a school that has purchased MLTI devices? And you do not. I think you can opt into MLTI in a variety of ways. Many districts leverage MLTI to purchase devices, but you do not need to do that. If this is something you're just becoming aware of, it's something to take into account in the future if you're not an MLTI school. People have asked about participating in both events. You certainly can participate in both. This obviously is happening in March. You can also participate in May. Registration for both of these events is open, so you can register for May now. And then the last thing is scholarships. We work with UMaine to provide $1,000 scholarships for students, and those scholarships are going to be available for this event as well. So part of it is students will share artifacts, kind of things that are attached to their name, so they kind of get in a drawing so they can get into the scholarship. So we've done that every year that we've had the virtual conference, and we'll continue to do so.
A couple other things to note that I thought of as you were answering those, John. First one is, if you have additional questions that we have not answered at the moment, I'm just looking ahead in the calendar, and I believe Thursday, the 4th of January in the morning, we have an information session coming up. And where you have accessed this video, you'll see links to a couple of other of those. There's a second one that day at 3 o'clock. So we encourage you to come in, and we'll offer some of this content again, but also answer any questions that you may not have had answered during this. We'll also include our email addresses in the link to the video you're watching right now, and that'll allow you to reach out to either one of us with questions. We'll include also Bethany Billinger's email. Bethany is the project manager for us and can answer logistical questions that you might have. John and I would be able to answer more about the gameplay and about sort of how to expect how the day goes. And the changes that we're making here are not changing the nature of the in-person conference. So that remains, I guess, fairly obviously synchronous to a certain degree. We're all in the same place at the same time. Those will be sessions just like they have been in the past. But if you have not attended the virtual conference before, we were running it on that same kind of scheduled day, and that raised many of the concerns or sort of complexities that we've mentioned. So that format remains the same. Visiting Orono's campus, which is an incredible opportunity for students, sort of seeing those various spaces and attending particular sessions. Those are also longer. These are all intended to be fairly short, 15 to not more than 30-minute activities. So you'll be covering more ground in the virtual conference. But of course, the project-based nature one of my sessions was about developing a Google slideshow that had multiple choices, kind of like a choose your own adventure. And in doing that, we went through the whole process in the course of their conference session in person. We were able to do that virtually last year. These activities break those sorts of longer events into smaller pieces. So I'll be doing one that offers students advice about how to design effective slides that are visually engaging and have good rules of thumb for how to develop those. But that'll be separate from talking about how to do animations in Google Slides. So those kinds of pieces that would have been combined in the past will be breaking, there we go, says the former English teacher, broken down into multiple parts, and you'll be engaging with those in sort of pieces that may not be contiguous to one another, but are intentionally so, allowing you to tour the various aspects of this.
Alrighty. So yes, if you have any questions, send them our way, and hopefully we answered most of your questions today. And have a wonderful afternoon, evening, or whenever you're watching this. And we definitely look forward to seeing many of you in some capacity in the future. Although virtual is a little bit different with seeing people, but we look forward to hearing from you and connecting with you in the future.
You can make up a question and come visit the 911 call center. I just wanted to say hello. Thanks, everyone.
Whatever it is.